Welcome back. Officials in Taiwan blaming a Chinese ship for cutting an undersea internet cable near a Taiwan harbor earlier this month. Service was minimally interrupted, but it still sent a message about the vulnerability of Taiwan's internet infrastructure. This is just the latest in a string of sabotage efforts from China. In November, a Chinese commercial ship was accused of deliberately cutting critical data cables in the Baltic Sea. NATO announcing plans yesterday to provide enhanced surveillance and deterrence and protect undersea cables in that region. China also reporting building D-Day-style barges as fears are growing of a Chinese invasion of Taiwan coming. Joining me now is York Space Systems Executive Chairman and former Pentagon Intelligence Senior Executive Charles Beams. Charles, good to have you this morning. Thanks very much. This is so disturbing. Your reaction to all of this?
Hi, Maria. First, thanks for having me on. And yeah, it is incredibly disturbing, but it should be no surprise. You know, if we remember, the intelligence community declassified a lot of things about 2 years ago, saying that they had specific intelligence that the president, Xi Jinping, specifically told his military that he wants to be ready for a land invasion of Taiwan in 2027. And yet, you know, the reality is that he may or may not do that, but he wants his military to be ready. And I think what we're seeing is all the preparations, but the cable cutting, the cyber attacks, and now, you know, the recently reported landing preparations.
So do you believe they will go into Taiwan in the next couple of years? What do you expect here?
I'm not, you know, time will tell, but clearly what they want to do is threaten. They want to coerce Taiwan to submit to Beijing, and so I think what we need to do is sort of stand by Taiwan in a sort of tit for tat thing. In other words, if they're going to start cutting cables, then we need to think about what can we do to support Taiwan so that it can, to the best of its ability, maintain its independence.
Yeah.
In the case of communication or whatever, supplies, much like we did, frankly, you remember the early Cold War, the Soviets, and we responded with the Berlin airlift, right? I think that was President Truman, and that was an effective deterrent, because basically what it said to these autocracies is we're not going to just, we the free are not going to just let this new axis of autocracy just sort of dictate the way the world's going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I wish this, you know, came up more yesterday in President-elect Trump's defense secretary nominee Pete Hegseth's hearing. I mean, he fended off attacks from Senate Democrats yesterday during a fiery confirmation hearing on Capitol Hill, and in my view, there weren't enough questions about things like Taiwan, China, and Ukraine. Listen to this.
Mr. Hegseth, I do not believe that you are qualified to meet the overwhelming demands of this job.
The American people need a SecDef who's ready to lead on day one. You are not that person.
There are a lot of other things you can do very well. You're a capable person, but you have not convinced me that you're able to take on this tremendous responsibility.
Several Senate Republicans came to his defense. Watch.
I'm confident that Mr. Hegseth, supported by a team of experienced top officials, will get the job done.
You got a man who has literally put his butt on the line. He served 20 years in the service, multiple deployments, has heard the bullets crack over the top of his head. What other qualifications does he need?
We need somebody who's going to go in there and fight for innovation, fight for change. I think you're that person.
Charles, it did get contentious at times. Your thoughts on Pete Hegseth as the defense secretary?
Let's be honest. The Secretary of Defense, the appointment of a Secretary of Defense is largely symbolic of the president's intent, as much as anything else. The real people who know the Pentagon know that the Pentagon is run by all the folks that report to the Secretary of Defense, including the deputy, the undersecretaries, the service secretaries, and on down. What clearly the signal is that the era of, the PC era is over. President Trump wants specific reform, and he wants Pete Hegseth to do that. And specifically, he wants to focus on on the warfighter, the warfighting commands. And I think that personally, I think that's the right approach, because for too long, for decades now, we've slid into this process where it's just process for process's sake inside the Beltway. And you talk to field units, and they're not getting the gear, they're not getting the equipment, they're not getting the support that they actually need. So, frankly, as long as we get the right folks that can work with Pete on this and enact these reforms. And I mean, it appears that this new administration is very, very bullish on reform. And so we're all eagerly anticipating to see what that shape that will take.
All right. Well, we'll be watching, of course. Charles, great to have you. Thanks very much for your analysis. Charles
Thanks,
Beams
Maria.
joining us. Good to see you, sir. Quick break.